Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 37 of This Valorant Life. In this episode, Adam and I are going to be going over the controller playbook and how to play Omen on Sunset. And so, with that, Adam, when we think about controllers, before we even get into specifically Omen on this map, how do you compare the controllers? So, we've got Viper, Astra, Brim, and Clove in Harbor, but we will remove him because he doesn't I mean, he's just getting reworked. So how would you classify those agents? Are they very similar or do they get played very differently?
I mean, there's definitely a huge playstyle difference. So Viper is like a completely in her own individual category, which is like she's a secondary smoker normally, aside from niche maps like Icebox and Viper. Icebox and Breeze, where the Viper is the main smoker. She doesn't have dome smokes, right? Like you have the orb, but it's a lot harder to place them.
Mhm.
So she's a secondary controller, and normally she's picked in place of a sentinel. So you can kind of think of Viper as a sentinel, just without flank trips. But like her bomb site holds are really good as well, and her lurks are really good. Where then we kind of get into all the other smokes with dome smokes. So you have Clove, Astra, Brim, and Omen, and they're all played like you can like kind of interchange them a little bit, but there's some obvious use cases for one over the other. So Brim and Clove are very what you would call like fast pop executes because you can pre-place all your smokes and then just hit the button and go. And then Omen and Astra kind of takes different tempo.
Mhm.
So in that lens, they have that category, but in a more like practical sense, Brimstone and Clove are more similar
Mhm.
because of the range of their smokes. So they tend to play more fast rotates on defense because limited smokes, and then Omen because he has a little bit further, and Astra because she has global. You can play more of like an anchor play style and on defense in particular, and that also enables them to be better lurkers on attack compared to Clove and Brimstone just being with the team
Mhm.
due to the limited range.
And when you think of Clove and Brimstone, are they kind of like a battle sage? They're battle controllers almost.
I do think so, yeah. And the thing is, I when people think of controllers being battle controllers, they think of Omen being the most close to duelist before Clove was in the game. And I think like the more that I play the role, the more I've realized that's not true. Like Brimstone and Clove, you just kind of dump your util and go. Omen is like, oh, I dump my util, but then I do like this weird creative reposition, or I want to stay alive because my smoke is recharging. Like, or I flash for my teammate. Like, Omen's a little bit more hands on, but also hands off in the same way. And it's, I guess, less simplified, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
There's more options and there are more angles or lines you can almost take in the way that you're playing.
Yes, there's a lot more variety for sure.
Okay. And maybe before also we just get into this with a duelist, at some level it's very clear you're supposed to tap heads and you're supposed to create space on attack. If you were to dial it down to a singular goal for a controller, what would that look like?
Creating the space that you guys are fighting in. So I talked about this when I was coaching Zasco, but basically I called it the arena concept. On attack, you're smoking certain spots to kind of shrink this area that you're fighting in. And on defense, your role essentially is just to block off the enemies to separate their team. So you're essentially just smoking off choke points, or mid-site smokes to give your teammates space to live and to play their life on site.
So on bind as an example, it's a real choice to smoke off backside, smoking off window or heaven and the back of sight and fighting for back of sight, or just smoking front of sight and fighting for front of sight. And so when you make a decision, it affects both where your team is going to fight and what your win condition looks like.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. The practical case of this would be like you might want more space and take more space if you're against eco weapons. So if you have rifles versus pistols, you want to take the long range gun duels. And if you are on the ecos, or like you're on the pistols and they're on the rifles, you might want to do closer smokes
Mhm.
just to like cheese a kill, get more creative.
Mhm.
And then if you're gun round versus gun round, you might opt for the simplest smoke. So that might be just smaller space. That might be more space. That's really bomb site dependent, I
Mhm.
think. But whatever feels most standard and most straightforward is what you would typically opt for on rounds that are even.
Okay. We will get to maybe the main goal of controller
Sure.
on defense. So we can flip back to sunset then.
Okay.
So on sunset, if we are on attack, where do you want to start, A or B?
I think the B bomb site's a little bit better to start
Okay.
with.
Okay. So if we are Omen, we are leading our team on attack here. We've decided to hit B. How are you thinking about smoking off this site?
So Sunset's getting changed soon, so I think this will be changed. But
Sure.
number one, your first smoke ideally is flush with the corner here, and not. I guess maybe I'm not using that word correctly, but you want this smoke instead of the one that's along this wall to get rid of this corner.
Because that guy can just stick in that corner
Yeah.
and peek.
And there's an argument to make that as Omen, you can actually smoke it how it is currently on screen because you can Omen blind that corner.
Mm,
But in my experience, that's not good enough. Normally, it's just better to also smoke out and then also just flash because if that guy's in the smoke, then he can't make the play.
sure.
So you just eliminate that play completely. As for your secondary smoke, there's been some type of variation as the map has kind of developed. The second smoke, sometimes you'll see front sight like this. Sometimes you'll see the spawn smoke instead. And I think it's kind of solidified to just use both smokes on the choke points instead of using a mid-sight smoke because the mid-sight smoke might actually help the defenders a little bit more than help the attackers. So I think these would be my standard smokes here.
How are you thinking through whether that mid-sight smoke is helping you versus not helping you?
It's what your goal is for. So if you go back to the arena concepts, with this space here, we're essentially fighting for this white box, but with the deeper smoke, we're fighting for this yellow box. So in terms of space, it's a lot smaller in the white box, which means that you don't have access to the backside when you're playing the post plant or just to buy time and actually get the bomb down. Because if you do the smokes that we have on screen here and fight for the white box, it's actually pretty difficult to get the spike down. And that is honestly the primary goal of why we do these smokes
Mhm.
is making sure we can actually, number one, have enough space to get the bomb plant, and number two, have a somewhat favorable post plant. With that in mind, like these two smokes here, if the plant was actually easier to do it, like, let's say like we move the smoke here, this if the plant was actually viable to go for this plant, this would probably be the standard smoke setup.
Mhm.
But it's very difficult to get the bomb down with these two
Feels like you
smokes
would
here.
get spammed.
Very, very spam heavy.
Yeah.
So because spam is an option or they just util dump you and get you off the plant, we have to increase the space that we need to actually get the bomb plant
Yeah.
down. And now this is a little bit better, but it doesn't really solve the problem here of where we want to plant.
Yeah.
We want to plant on pillar. So you could argue, I guess, that you can smoke here
Yeah.
and then smoke here. And that actually might be a pretty good variation. I just haven't seen it before.
Mhm.
But this will allow you to take backside space and then your plant spot is here, and that's not too bad.
So it's hard for us to plant if we don't have backsite. So therefore, we're smoking off backsite and we're fighting for almost the whole site before we plant
Correct.
because it's not viable. Unlike find a where it is viable to smoke off front sight and just plant behind the truck.
Correct.
What's interesting, I think, is so if you move that smoke back, is as a controller, because we just finished doing the initiator series a couple weeks ago. As controller, we're controlling the arena and we're setting the boundaries. Whereas the initiators, most of their util is about clearing out or finding the people on site. And so it's interesting that controllers are setting the boundaries and then the initiators are figuring out the stuff that's inside the boundaries.
That's a good way to frame it. I mean, every role has their job during the execute, minus the sentinel probably. Um, if we want to outline all three roles, it's controllers create the boundary or the arena. Initiators figure out how to navigate that arena to send in the duelist to go, like to create their pathing. So I don't know why this comes to mind, but if I think of uh, like an anime or like a game or something, like your controller is kind of like the dungeon itself, and then your initiator is like your pathfinder, like you're trying to figure out how to navigate the maze or the dungeon or whatever.
Mhm.
And then I guess your duelist is like the actual scout that goes in and does it.
What about util timing? So what I've heard before is, as an example, if we're scaling into this site, we should be smoking off the sight line that we see first, and then smoking off the secondary sight line after. So we would pro- definitely smoke off the close market before we smoke back pillar or back sight to CT. Is that kind of the thinking that we should think about util in terms of order? And then outside of order, what about the execute itself? Are we timing it right when we execute, or is it okay if it's 5-10 seconds early?
So the order is correct. You want to use util on what you get contact on first. That's true. That's true for initiators as well. You clear the space that is closest to you. As for the actual execute, what is the timing of your smokes and everything? Omen, you kind of have to pre-fire your smokes a little bit. So as your teammates are kind of like here, I'll just throw in the jet, for example. Let's say like the jet's here and we're kind of back here. Our first smoke should be kind of coming around the point that this jet is going around this corner, or at least sitting on this corner. And then that allows us to then throw the second smoke and then also pull out our omen blind to go for the execute. And this is the kind of difference when you play like Brim or Clove. You can just have it preset and then you actually be next to the jet, and then you can be a lot more precise with your smoke timing to try to maximize the length of your smoke. Omen, you do have to pre-fire it a little bit, which is why it's really important to be like, I'm smoking now, I'm smoking now, so your teammates can go
Mhm,
and you don't have two wasted smokes.
mhm, mhm, and call me that beforehand. As the omen, then here we've smoked off, we've flashed, we've got sight, we've got the plant down. As a smokes player, are you more incentivized to stay on site or to play off site, or is it more map site or bomb site dependent?
Typically your controllers are incentivized to stay alive. So if we think about post plant, the incentive for a lot of these controllers to stay alive is they either get rechargeable
Mhm,
util or they have util that gets them off spike for delay. So Astra, you have suck to get them off tap. Brimstone, you have Molly and potentially ult. Viper, you have the Molly. Um, Omen has a rechargeable smoke, and then Clove has a rechargeable smoke. So it makes a lot of sense for your controller to be one of the players late round. Um, and it's also why they are really good at playing lurk roles, because they can use the util and then kind of just go lurk or already be in a lurk position and shoot them in the back.
and so in this case then, with the way omen plays because of the TP, we make those smokes, we flash. Are we going to TP on site, or do you think you're going to, once you flash and the team's on site, you're already starting to slowly wrap back to market and lurk?
Both are very good options. For Omen in particular, there is a bias, in my opinion, to play for sight, because now you can like say you get a fight somewhere, then you can TP and move. So you can kind of be a nuisance in that sense in the post plant. But it's more bomb site dependent. Like for example, Haven on the A post plant, that one way CT is very good. So you don't really need to go for a wrap play, and it's actually really beneficial for you to stay on site.
Yeah.
And you can also TP back and forth between positions. On the B Sunset post plant specifically, it's kind of meta on this bomb site. Actually, just everyone go back to main and play spam.
Yeah.
So um, that's probably what we're going to do. If you do want to play on site, your Omen will probably be one of the site players instead of being a B main player, just because you can reposition better. Say you are pillar, for example, you could take a fight and then TP back to main, or you could take a fight on the guy's spawn and then TP like into this corner, or you can even start in this corner, get a fight, and then TP back. So on this bomb site in particular, it makes a lot of sense for your Omen to play on site. I think it also makes sense for your Omen to play on site on A, because you can play the one way. We'll get to that in a second.
Mhm.
Or sorry, on TP onto the box. We'll get into that in a second.
What would make it a good situation for you to want to lurk and wrap market?
A good situation number one would be delay. So if your teammates can delay, you can go for that because you actually have the time for it. The second thing would be considering the enemy team's win condition. So if they have really good ultimates for the retake, you might want to go for that rat play.
Mm,
And the third would be if you find that the enemy team is what do you call fast rotating, you can then go for a lurk play and actually just end up behind them, because if they slow rotate, you actually might be caught in a sandwich,
Yeah.
and that's annoying. But if they're fast rotating, you'll just be behind the entire team, and that's really nice.
Plant location. Does that affect your thinking around work? Right now, we have it planted behind pillar. It's pretty safe. But if you had it planted in front of the pillar, facing main,
Right, like here.
yeah, that's a way better position for you to be able to work from.
That's true too. Like there's certain maps where wrap plays are better than others because the position of the spike is, you can play it from your lurk position, like once you finish the wrap. The most notable one would be on split. If you can plant for heaven on both of those bomb sites,
Mhm,
wrapping mid is very strong, which split is coming back.
mhm,
So that bomb plant position is very good.
mhm,
Whereas like other bomb sites, like for example Ascent, you don't really do wrap bomb plants, or like plants that are really open. Like B doesn't really have one.
mhm,
In A, you typically just plant gen anyways. You can't see it from heaven.
mhm.
So wrapping on those two bomb sites makes less sense. And if you were to go for a lurk or a wrap, it's more so just to get a kill rather than playing spike as the win condition. But there are situations for it. It's a lot more nuanced.
And then, as it relates to pathing behind the duelist onto site, is there any considerations for how you should follow them as a controller? Are you really trying to play your life as well because you want your util post plant?
That question is a tough one. So I'm heavily biased towards playing onsite as controller, but there are that other, like the complete opposite category of controllers playing offsite and just throwing smokes, lurking, maybe just purely playing for post plant. I think realistically the answer is both is bad. You should be able to do both.
Mhm,
But if you are going to have a bias towards one, I would actually bias towards being a trader, going out on site, scaling, using all of your util for the hit if you need to. So like not saving anything for the post and just being gun out. I think that's the better bias to have, because you can't guarantee your teammates will delay long enough for you to play post plant or go for a lurk. And in that case, you're kind of just baiting your team. So
mhm,
with that said, now that we have that framing, I think controllers should be pathing ideally along with your duelist.
mhm,
So in Omen in particular, my favorite thing to do if you're playing with the jet is when the jet dashes out, you just follow up with the TP. So you literally just TP directly into the jet smoke, and then now you have two people running out of that smoke. And in order to do this at a high level, you have to be number one, throwing your smokes really early, but number two, actually walking. I know that's like sounds like an obvious thing, but actually walking forward in B main in this case as you're throwing your smoke. Because a lot of players, myself included, when I first started playing Omen, when I'm in that weird smoke form, I'm just throwing my smokes, but I'm not actually physically moving because I don't know how to navigate the space, which then causes me to be
wait,
last in and late to the bomb site hit. So one tip that helped me was actually using the alternate smoke form. So I think if you pull out your smoke, you hit R or something, it like goes to the other one, and you can actually see as you're moving, and you use the mini map. So you just look on the top left and use your mini map to help figure out your smokes rather than using the dark form.
got
But I'm sure you can get good at either.
it. Okay.
Um, but yeah, that's how I would think about routing, is if you can TP with your movement duelist, that will be really nice. It is risky, but if you have the jet smoke, it makes it better.
I feel like we've handled B. What does this execute look like A? Well, actually, maybe before we go to A, do we need to consider a split at all, or do you feel like the B main execute is probably sufficient?
The B split is very strong, but to pull it off successfully, it requires some work. But I'll show it. So you have the top mid smoke, and then you have the spawn smoke, and then your omen's either mid with a team flashing this lane here, for these two kind of corners, or your B main, your Omen goes late B main, and he's either flashing this lane here, this first one,
Mhm,
um, or he goes in this corner and kind of does an angled flash for this. Um, my preference is to actually be the B main player, because a lot of players in market tend to play. I'll just put X's for this angle here along that slant, and then kind of behind the box. And then this, I'm going to put a circle for the corner. That's a lot easier to clear, in my opinion.
super,
So you
yeah,
don't really need the flash for that. But the other two are a lot harder. So
because they can peek both sides.
yeah.
Okay, great. Let's go to A then. What does
Okay.
the A execute look like?
So if you're going fast, and what I mean by fast is like you're scaling up left side lane, you omen blind left side off rip, you smoke top cat, and then your secondary smoke normally is in spawn like this. This is going to be your standard.
Mhm,
Um, the omen blind here if you have a cipher camera or some type of info to time your blind off of, it's good to stop your teammates from dying here, and that's how you would best use this flash. Essentially, just to get past the one-way A main choke, which is defenders fighting for this lane. And let me actually categorize that box. So you have to use util at the start to get past this yellow box, which is what the initial flash helps. And if defenders are fighting for that A main space, then it's kind of cooked. It's kind of like a Lotus Rubble or Haven A main. You have to get past that initial stage before you go into the execute. But if you can, then that's kind of your run through here. Now, if you are able to hold your flash, a better flash is actually to hit default box. It doesn't necessarily matter if you angle it like this or do it from elbow. As long as it gets default box, I'm sure it's good enough. Everything else is kind of like bonus. But let me back up for a second. There's two ways to execute A. You either go heavy elbow. Whoops, that's a box. Let me get the arrow back. You either go heavy elbow or you go heavy left side. And
Mhm.
it's rare that you can actually split both unless you do like this weird thing where you default A, take elbow control, pause, and then re-hit A.
Why do
But
you say heavy split instead of an even split?
you don't have timing, right? So if I go up elbow, sorry, yeah, I go up elbow, the distance just takes a lot longer for me to make it up elbow. By the time my teammates are already fighting lane, they might be dead. Now, if the lane players are like better at the game, then they will wait for the elbow players to come out, and then they'll go through and then time to hit better, and that's an ideal situation. But it's a lot harder to do that because of the one way. So you need someone to go through left that has a smoke. So if you have ciphers in the game, you would cipher cage the one way and go through. If you have an ISO, you would push wall and go through. If you have a jet smoke, you could jet smoke the one way, et cetera, et cetera. But let me back up for a second. So you have the two standard smokes, and then you either execute fast with the blind on the left, or if you can save it, you would use it for the delayed sight hit when you are going elbow. And elbow forces you to hit A with the delayed timing, because after you take A main, you also have to clear all of elbow,
Okay.
which involves this corner, and then the guy back here
Okay.
as well.
Are there any other smoke positions you would think of as you're hitting this site, or is this pretty much standard?
There's a really good one way spawn here. Allows you to get rid of that angle that people get on top of this box.
Mm.
Because if you have the standard smoke, if they get on this box, they can see over it. But the other benefit of this one way is it allows you to full take spawn. So like this close right position, you can actually take that.
Hmm.
So I saw it from a Xandered VOD in particular. They actually were playing Clove Raise, and the way they would take A is they would one way it, and then they would combo the Raise Nade and the Clove Decay on the corner here as they're exiting elbow. And the crazy thing is they didn't even comment. I think it's like maybe it's just like a thing that happens normally in higher level gameplay anyways. Like let's say they were scrimming, because I think these were both pro players that did it. This is probably something they already know from scrims, but you rarely see this type of play in ranked.
Sure.
Um, but that is a very good option to do if you're dying a lot from the guy spawn on the box, and if you have enough util to clear the spawn area. Otherwise, the floor is standard.
And as Omen on this site, are you preferentially going elbow or going left side?
I prefer to go elbow,
Why is that?
purely for the reason that my TP is actually kind of good here. So with the two smokes up here, and we hit the bomb site, I can actually TP out to this like behind. I guess you call that default,
Mhm.
and hold the spawn push. And then that also lets me get a different angle on, say,
Default
this
box.
neon that's default box. Yeah. It's a little bit risky, but at the same time, it's not that bad. Whereas if I'm going from this side, if I TP, my only TP spot would be into this corner. And I feel like it's a lot harder for my teammates to hold me because of the one way.
Yeah,
And elbow gets smoked off less frequently than the lane one way. So for that reason, I do think I prefer
I see.
going
Yes, because they're
elbow.
going to smoke us off in the elbow, and so us being able to TP out really helps us with our angles,
Right.
and to be able to double peek bomb site A itself.
Mm-hmm.
What about post plant positioning? Where typical default plant is there,
Mm-hmm.
If it's really safe, sometimes it's behind here, but let's assume that it's behind neon. Um, where do you want to play post plant ideally?
So normally attackers don't take spawn or top cat control,
Yep.
but if there's a reason to do so, then your omen would be one of the players fighting there. So now that we've covered that,
Why do you say
um,
that? Why would it be Omen fighting for that?
because your initiator and your duelist and your controller are your kind of your three roles there. Your sentinel is almost never going to be in the mix, and after like the site execute has kind of happened, number is going to be lower. Your controller is going to be kind of part of that. Normal, at least for the omen here, you're going to be on site anyways. Like you're not going to be off site. Okay, so now that we rule out that scenario, if we're kind of playing a standard turtled post plant, my favorite is actually on top of default here, like literally on top of this box. And then that allows you to hold, I'll actually just put some lines here. So you can hold the A push here, and then now your default player can peek off of you, off of this line, which is fantastic. And then if you have an elbow player, I'm just going to put raise here, and she's holding your elbow or your spawn run out, the omen can now pivot and then peek spawn by taking a step to the right, and your phoenix can also do it as well. So you have some really good crossfire setups here. Top gen angle holds short, elbow player holds spawn, and then your default box player can pivot between the two, and that's really nice. um, this is if you're playing a really turtle setup. Now all of this goes down the drain if you get smoked off elbow on the retake and your raise is cut off. But at that point, you can kind of like, your omen kind of jiggle spawn, or your phoenix can kind of spot spawn for you,
Mhm.
and then that works pretty well. So that is my favorite way to play the post as omen. But if you do have a little bit more space, and let's say you actually didn't scale elbow, this is where tens plays actually in pretty regularly in the A post plant. It's he'll TP onto this box, he'll just sit here. And then when the enemy team starts retaking, if he has a second smoke back up, he'll smoke it and then just hold the smoke. But if his second smoke isn't up yet, he's just going to bait, and then he'll shoot them in the side of the head as they continue to scale out. So being on this box is very powerful for sure.
I see.
Aside from those two, if you don't have anyone else playing default, then putting yourself default is good. Someone typically should always be default because it's hard to clear and it's a good pivot spot. But otherwise, the two unique ones for Omen would be top gen and top short box.
Okay. Um, and then lurking isn't really as much of an option for this site.
You can, if we go with the early flash play. So say like we do the early flash and then we smoke. As you're throwing your smokes, you could be walking tiles and then flanking top mid, and that play works really well. You just have to be ready for the fights, because if the B rotators come in, they're going to be rotating here. You just have to be ready to intercept or let them pass and then shoot them in the back.
For the default bomb plant location, can Omen one way it? Feels like
Probably.
you might be able to one way it off the box, but I just haven't seen it before.
I've seen that smoke on retakes before, but not like attacker post plants. Because like normally attacker post plants you just use like to cut the crossfire and like make it stronger. So like you would re-smoke here, you would re-smoke here. But I don't normally see a one way in the post. But
Okay.
I definitely could see it being good.
When maybe the last one, and maybe this is not specific to a site hit, I think it's just helpful to walk through so we have more options. Working top mid, how do you think through smokes top mid?
Yeah, so top mid takes are slower. So typically you start with the standard smoke top mid just to actually take the first rectangle. So let me go ahead and put that here. This is your first rectangle.
Mhm.
If you feel like you can get that space without the top mid smoke, or if you already have it, then you go into your second smoke, which my preference is actually one waying the left here. But sometimes people prefer the floor smoke. I prefer the one way. And then you just start fighting top mid. Um,
You
the variation,
one way left side top mid, and so you're fighting exclusively right side top mid.
you're looking for these fights, correct? But you that doesn't necessarily mean that you're scaling and pushing spawn and
Sure.
pushing here. You could, but normally you're just looking for that duel, and you might walk up for a little bit and take that fight. But the alternative is very good as well, where you smoke on the stairs in that ledge, and then you go and take the fights on the left side. And the reason why this is actually very good is because um, elusively, you would expect the defender here on this left side to have the advantage in this fight. but that's not the case at all. The attackers have a very clear advantage on this fight because you can kind of like isolate the peaks here, and this defender on the left side will always get contact before the defender on the right. So it's actually an isolated duel that's not tradable for the defenders, which makes this fight pretty good. And on top of that, if you do smoke right side, this this pathing to go into spawn is safer than it is to push this way. Um, I don't know why. Maybe if I sit down and look at it for a second, it'll make more sense. But it's just easier to go left than it is right. So, um, how you decide on which side you smoke is honestly not that straightforward and clear to me.
Okay.
But I guess I would say experiment with both.
Fundamentally, as a controller on defense, or maybe it doesn't matter, are you opting or feeling that being aggressive or passive is the better option? If I'm going to throw my answer out there, I'm thinking because we're on Omen, it's typically more of a passive angle where we are jump spotting and setting up for some type of smoke and then flash play to kill the first entry. But what is your thinking here?
When I think of passive versus aggressive, I think of how much space we're contesting.
Sure.
So let me kind of answer it from that lens. Um, you either fight for A main control or you fight for B main control. I feel like those are like your two options on defense. And as smokes, the direct correlation would be the one way on A main and then the smoke on the B main stairs. That's how I've kind of developed to play my defense. So if I'm opting to fight a main and my teammates are fighting A, I like to be there so that I can do the blind on this lane. So one way I blind, we fight for A main. That's great. At some point, you could also start playing markets and then doing the A main smoke and then just closing the door, and that lets you be here for the B hit with your blind and you smoke. You could even TP onto the box and see over the market smoke. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So you either contest A main or you contest B main. If you can't contest A main successfully, or if the enemy team is just going B main a lot to either break trips or farm the orb because the B orb is easier for attackers, smoking B main and denying that completely is very good. And then you can cross behind this box. You can play this a few ways. You can just hold the angle, you can hold an off angle on the right side, or you can have flash out, and then your teammate gets contact, and then you blind, you swing, and then you kill him. And then you can TP out if there's any risk, which is really nice. So that's kind of how I approach my defense as Omen in a nutshell is I'm either smoking A main one way or I'm smoking B main off rip, and it's like one of those two, and it's never not one, if that makes sense.
Never not one.
Like I would never hold both of my smokes and not smoke A main or
Got
B
it. Got
main.
it. And if I am looking at the common thread between how you're playing both those positions, I feel that the guiding principle is finding an opportunity for you to use your flash profitably.
Mm. I mean, the flash is really good. And with this map in particular, there's some pretty straight lines. Like the A main line is straight, the B main line, if you're in B main, is straight. So it kind of just lends itself to make these plays pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so that first one in A, if we go to A,
Okay.
that's really supporting your teammates.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to be fighting and taking control. So whatever happens, happens. They either lose or they win. Let's assume you win because your plan goes according to plan.
Mm-hmm.
Are you rotating mid after that? Or what's the next step after you, let's say, hopefully win that engagement?
So normally once you establish the A line, normally your duelist stays on the A line and then your initiator and controller rotates,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not that rare for your controller to stay on the A
Mm-hmm.
line or your initiator. Like, really, it's all interchangeable. Someone has to stay on the A line. And if no one does and you're just playing rotate, then that's because you spotted a lot on the enemy team hitting the other site, or they haven't really done like fakes or lurks.
Okay.
And if they're not here, they're not here.
Okay.
But yeah, someone wants to stay on the A line, and whoever rotates is kind of, it honestly doesn't matter. There's reasons for all of them.
Let's say it doesn't go well and you get rolled or one guy dies, or maybe it just goes 4v4. What are you doing now that they're about to flood on site?
The secondary thing would be smoke lane and then try to play for lane by playing, say, like in this corner here, and you're just kind of hoping that you can hold lane. And then when they start coming out elbow, your teammates will be flooding with you, and you're just all fighting and basically just looking here because the one way has your right side. That's option one. Option two is to fully turtle onto site and play default box, and then hopefully your teammates hold lane, and then you're just like looking for kills from default box. And this works really well if they don't have damage util to clear you,
Okay.
because it's very difficult to kill this default player. So if you play it well and you play it, you don't commit too hard to fights and kind of just like look for timings, juggle peek maybe, and be annoying. Um, your teammates will rotate in time. And you can play a really good A side hold.
When are you smoking off elbow?
If we've decided at the round start that we're not going to fight for A main and have both smokes, then I actually we might be playing for elbow control, which means that my smoke will either be here or it might be here. And then that's kind of when we're holding for elbow control. But to answer your question for this smoke,
Yeah.
is I think what you're alluding to.
Yeah.
I really only smoke elbow here if I guess like I have the second smoke for some reason. The lane one way takes priority most of the time. And then I guess the secondary thing would be if I just know they're heavy elbow and they're not really coming up lane.
Got it.
Which I'm trying to think of a situation that would happen, but I guess it does happen pretty frequently based on audio cues.
Are there any weird TPs that you would do on like repositioning to support you as you're trying to hold site?
Yeah, so the first one would be on this box. So actually something I used to do is I'll just start the round up here and then I'll just AFK. And then if they hit A, because we weren't fighting for A main control, then I'll just either hold my one way or I'll intentionally put the smoke on the floor so that they're incentivized to push through it. And then I'll just hold the smoke. That's a really nice way. Or if I'm like on site or something and I'm falling all the way back, then I might actually reposition all the way back into spawn and TP up here. If I just don't feel like I can play default, normally that's because they're playing breach on the enemy team. And if I stay on site, I'm going to get aftershocked.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to fully leave and then TP up here.
When you're flashing, are you trying to yeah, right there. What's the timing there? Is it off rip or are you going to wait for contact before you flash? Like I guess my question is how greedy are you trying to be here?
Ideally, I am greedy. It depends on their agent. So if they're playing Neon, I might insta flash, or I'll flash as soon as I hear the Neon wall. But against Neon, the timing is pretty critical there to do it early. But if they're not playing Neon or if they're not like double slashing or jet dashing up, then I'll hold it most of the
Okay.
time. And either my teammate jiggling will see them and then I'll blind, or if we use a Sova Dart, like some type of info util, then I'll blind off of that.
Okay. Maybe the last piece of this is let's say we are coming back to the site and we are retaking. What are the smokes and what are you thinking about for using util as you retake?
Gotcha. So a really good smoke is the one way,
Of
and
course.
a really good smoke is elbow. So pretty standard there.
Okay.
You decide which one you're smoking based on where the majority of your players are. So if you're 2-2, it's it doesn't really matter. But if say you're 3 spawn and 1 top cat, then you're gonna smoke elbow instead of top cat. As for your flash, if you still have it, a really good blind is to get Gen and default box just to kind of get rid of that crossfire. My personal favorite, because I like to be in the action a little bit more and I find myself to be cat a little bit more, is I will smoke one way on the right and then I'll omen blind like this, and then I just start running out. So this omen blind gets rid of the elbow angle, like say this guy here. Gets rid of that gen and top gen angle, which is really nice. And all I have to do is worry about default, which to be fair is kind of difficult to deal with. But that's literally the only position in play. Oh, I guess technically this position's in play too, under the catwalk,
Mhm.
but those are really the only two positions in play after this util.
Okay. I feel like that feels pretty good for A then.
Mm-hmm.
As um as we think about B then, we've already talked about the blind. We've talked about how you can play B main. Let's be clear here because I feel that sometimes when players play this position, there's this underlying idea that we want to be a hero, that we need to get 2 or 3 kills. Whereas I feel that the best players here get one kill and then they're out and they're just
Mm.
untradeable.
You need to be able to understand how much risk you're taking on. So if they're like util dumping you, util dumping you, you're just gonna flash and get out. You're not even gonna take a fight.
Mm,
But if they're like kind of being lazy, like they're not using enough util to clear you, if they just don't have enough util, you're gonna punish that. You want to flash, you want to try to kill two. You know, if you feel like you don't really have good cues to flash off of, then you might just like hold an off angle, kill one, and then TP out and just like that be your
mm,
play.
mm,
But it really depends on how respectful the opponents are of clearing you.
mm,
And in some scenarios, like when I play this spot, I've flashed and killed three, maybe even killed four. And sometimes I play that scenario, I've tried to go for those kills and they just used everything on me. I've gotten zero.
mm.
And you just really have to understand how hard they're going to clear you. Like if they have ult, you're not going to play that
So
spot. Like if they
even
have gank
as we
ult,
have a plan here, our execution is contextual.
mm,
So if they are util dumping us, then let's get out and let's be happy they have no util for sight. And if they're not using util, then let's punish.
exactly. I mean, that's why the whole concept of contesting neutral space is literally that. If they aren't respecting the neutral space, you're going to punish. You know, if they are contesting neutral space properly, then you've traded util there, and then now you can fall back, and they have less util for the hit.
But if we don't contest that neutral space and they don't use util to clear it, we're letting them get away with it.
Yes, and if they end up hitting your bomb site and they have like double initiator, you're not going to be able to play on site. Or if they have like really good ultimates, you're probably going to have to play retake, and that's not a good, situation either.
Okay. So let's say they're flooding site now. Where are you? Are you smoking and trying to stay on site and keep yourself alive? Or are you getting off site?
Great question. So you do have the two options. You could, if you have good timing, you're going to smoke main and then you're going to flash and you're going to try to go for a fight and get a fight first there.
Mhm.
That would be
Ideal.
ideal. If you can't do that, or if you have tried to do that, then your next best option is to smoke mid site and stay alive. Mid site here, I like to do on the stairs. You can spam the planer here. It's harder for them to push through, and you can go back and forth between these two corners. That's pretty good. Your secondary smoke, if you're doing a mid side smoke, is actually the left side here, and that just kind of the same idea, but you just do the opposite on this side. It depends on where you're playing to do this smoke. So if I'm playing market, I will do the what do you call this left smoke. If I'm playing backside, I'll probably do the stair smoke. Um, and this is under the assumption that we have a second smoke. If you only have one smoke, it depends on the timing. If you think you can smoke B main and flash and hold them behind B main or like separate the duelist from the team, you'll do that smoke. If you're going to be too late to do that B main smoke for whatever reason, like let's say you started B main, you TP'd out and then you're falling back, then it makes a lot of sense to do one of these secondary smokes here.
So then what I'm hearing really though is that unless you're going to get ulted off site, you're probably not going to be running back and playing boba.
That's not how I play controller.
Sure.
Some people do play like that. And I guess that would depend on your current performance state. If you think like you're just really not having a good game, um, maybe you don't have a good gun, even then I would probably argue you might want to take the risk. But regardless, like if you're just in a situation when you feel like your odds of staying on site and getting a kill is very low, then just opting to play retake is 100% better
Okay.
because you don't want to give your life for nothing.
On bind, we're kind of selling out and rotating pretty fast, especially because of the TPs. Or specifically on B, you don't really want to be retaking B. What about this map? Are we selling out and rotating pretty fast? Are we already having it in our head that we're going to leave B if we hear footsteps A, or are we trying to keep them pretty honest?
That's a very good question. No matter the map, if you can do the bind example and sell out and play fast rotate, that should be your option. But rotating quickly on Sunset just doesn't exist. You would have to be the top mid player, and your rotate is cut off by this lurker tiles. And even then, your rotate from top mid into B. Sorry, I don't have the arrows. Rotating from top mid into B will always be late. And if you're A, then you're already A, right? So you can make it there, but you will never be able to play a position from my experience that you can be centered and then rotate quickly and make it to the bomb site before the hit's over.
Okay.
And that's also one of the reasons why I think I struggle so much on this map, because that means effectively half of the map is up to your teammates, which is difficult. to
Okay.
say the least.
How would you be if you're coming back into B then? How are you playing B on retake?
So if you have a site teammate somewhat alive and you're rotating, this first site smoke is really good so that your site teammate can kind of stay alive and then your teammates can flood out spawn help them. So this is a really good one that I stole from Xander.
So you like
But
that smoke over this smoke when you're retaking?
yes, and I think it's primarily because I guess like you don't have to turn around when you're going
Yeah.
here. If you smoke here, you now have to fight left, but then you can't fight main at the same time and get on spike. So here you can kind of fight like this one pathway. But I guess that's also because it's slower for the enemy team to jump up onto this lane. Whereas like if you already smoke right side and they're already through it or about to get through it, it does feel kind of wasted.
Okay.
But yeah, that is a good question. I don't.
No, I feel it. I feel that if you're retaking, this smoke feels way better. If you already have a guy on site and he is here, then you're not checking right. That's why I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
smoke feels so much better.
So that would be one smoke. The other smoke obviously was just spike. So unfortunately, B Sunset
Mhm.
post plant involves just planting and running main and playing spam. If you're in a game that happens like that, you actually don't want to smoke spike. Um, I've tried smoking spike and it's very 50-50, but most of the time it's not actually 50-50. Attackers have the favorite. So the meta of pro play has kind of adapted to not smoke spike and instead smoke somewhere on main. So you have the option of one weighing. Um, and this is under the assumption you can take site control first
Mhm.
because they're playing off site. So you one way on the box, and that allows you to kind of diffuse a little bit better, or you smoke one of the sides. So you smoke left side and you kind of fight through together, or you smoke right side. I personally think smoking left side is better, just because you can use util on this corner, and the other side doesn't have a corner, so you can clear that and kind of fight through.
Mhm.
Um, Ideal scenario is you have a smoke for main and for the spike, so that you can kind of cover both. But um, if you only have one smoke, it would kind of be user's choice, I think.
Okay.
Whether or not you do the one way, the left side smoke, or the spike. I don't actually know which one's better, but in some shape or form, we have to fight the people that are spamming us. So you don't want to smoke main ever if they're playing offsite. Like this is the no smoke.
Is there anything we didn't cover that you feel we should have on Sunset with Omen?
Maybe if you're aggressing mid, you have option of smoking
Yeah.
bottom mid here. You have smoking tiles. Normally, if you're aggressing tiles, then you smoke bottom mid. This is very common to do if you have like a raise or a neon. They kind of just send it tiles,
Hmm.
and then you kind of do like an A main crunch.
Hmm.
I don't know why I did an arrow here, but
Hmm.
you crunch A main with the tiles player and the A main players.
Hmm.
If you aren't doing that, and you just kind of like want to aggress mid or you want to deny the lurker, um, or if you're playing market, then smoking tiles is pretty good, and then you kind of just take this market fight here. Definitely not too bad. So when I was playing with an opper and he was like a pro player, I believe, he asked me to smoke tiles on repeat instead of me smoking bottom mid, and that worked pretty well. But that was the only game I've ever played where someone has asked for the tile smoke, and I guess that meta hasn't caught on to ranked yet because normally everyone just default smokes
And
top
that's
mid.
because he's holding the um, deep mid cross with an op.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
was he holding from
Sometimes
market? Was he holding from top mid?
from market he would walk out. Sometimes he would even walk out all the way over here.
Interesting.
But he just doesn't want to worry about tiles, which makes a lot of sense because you won't be able to support your teammate if you do this smoke and then they smoke you off. Now the market player has to take the direct fight on tiles. But because it's more common to smoke top mid and not market, if you smoke tiles and then you support your mid player from market, now you can just hold the smoke, which is easier to do. So
Got it.
we found a lot of success doing that in this game. And I haven't been able to replicate that in other games, but
Cool.
it makes a lot of sense to do it this way.
Well, that was our controller playbook run through. I think the only one we have left is Sentinel or an anchor player. So we'll get to that one. We also have Pearl coming back soon. So there's that. If there's other topics you want us to talk about or go over, please let us know. We've got some cool interviews coming as well. And we are still working on the community. So that's still coming. It will eventually get here. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope this was as enjoyable for you as it was for us. Hope you have a great day and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much.